Good morning. My name is Betsy Corcoran. I'm a CEO and co-founder of EdSurge. We're news and business information and insights site on the web all about education technology. And I'm really pleased this morning to be moderating a terrific panel on the whole question of the ecosystem of education technology. So I don't need to tell you that over the last 4 years, we've seen this explosion of companies all around the education technology space. At EdSurge, we've probably chronicled the emergence of more than 500 startups just in the last couple of years. So what's going on with these things? Are these real businesses? Is this feel good? Is this a moment where we're just all sort of singing Kumbaya and holding hands and hoping that the world gets to be a better place? Or are we actually building businesses? And so that's what this panel is here to talk about. We're here to talk about the business, talk about the potential, and also to talk about whether any of this stuff is ultimately going to make a difference for students, for learning outcomes, for the way we think about learning overall. We have a terrific panel, and we are going to take you from A to Z. We're going to take you from the early stages of startups and the question of whether they're actually being based on research, all the way up through IPOs. So really pleased to have everyone here. We are going to save about 15 minutes at the end for questions, so start thinking about the questions that I'm forgetting to ask these fine folks, and we'll give you a chance to join in and be part of this conversation. My charge to the panelists today was to ask everyone to bring a piece of information, a piece of data, some evidence of what we are really seeing here. And I'll start with one. Last week, the Gates Foundation released a report that was a survey of more than 3,000 teachers, 1,500 students, talking about what kinds of education technology tools they were using and were they helping and what difference they were making. And there were a couple of interesting points. They identified more than close to 1,000 different education technology products that are out there. They could have seen most of those by reading EdSurge, of course, but it's okay. But they found more than 1,000, but they found that the teachers that they were surveying knew less than half of them. And even more tragically, about 43% of the teachers said they didn't feel that they had the tools that they needed, the digital instructional tools that they needed to deliver Common Core standards and the kind of information that we really want our students to learn. So there seems to be still a really big opportunity gap, and that's part of what we're going to be talking about today. So first, I'm going to start with Barbara Kashan. Dr. Kashan is running a design charrette at the University of Pennsylvania's Graduate School of Education, helping take companies, hopefully from a research base, into real companies. She also goes by Bobby. Bobby, what are you seeing? Are we actually starting to see some genuine research-based education technology companies? How good's the research?
Well, when you think of graduate schools of education, you think of esoteric research that has no impact on getting into the classroom or getting into the higher university. We've done a lot of work because the current dean at the graduate school, Dr. Andy Porter, has been a big fan of research to practice. So when I was sort of out in the other world before I came back to the university, I said we really need to look at companies that we can support by researchers, we can identify the research that's having an impact, and then we can work with entrepreneurs to have them interpret it, implement it, and pivot their companies to reflect good research. So we did this in 3 ways at the university. We started by having a Milken GSE business plan competition that we run every year. We put through over 200 companies a year. This year we've just announced our 12 finalists, and we get amazing groups and amazing companies that come through. We provide competition, and we provide $150,000 in prize money every year. From that, we identify a very significant group of companies. We ask them all if they're doing research, what research they're based on, and that's a criteria in our selection of the finalists. So this past year, based on that, we decided that we needed to leverage those companies and help them grow from their research base, and we created something called the Education Design Studio, which we ran our first cohort of companies through, and that's a combination hybrid seed fund, incubator, and gap funding. So we do see that the research is having an impact. That
Are all of those companies based on research that is really strong?
No, the answer is they're not all based on research that's really strong, but we're working to help them understand the research. When they join our incubator, they are assigned a researcher from either the University of Pennsylvania or someone else in the field that's working in their area, and that researcher works with them the same way most incubators assign a mentor and an investor and other people to mentor them in the marketing and sales. We assign a researcher to help them in the research area. So
can
we're
you see
getting
a difference, and last point on this, can you see a difference between the ones that are research-based and the ones that aren't?
We absolutely do see a difference. We see a difference in their understanding of what's impact they're looking for, how to structure their technology to have that impact, and long term we see a difference on when they go to sell their product and being able to say that their product is based on this research, here's the research we've done, or here's the research that's been done about it, and here's the impact. So they're absolutely benefiting from that.
Okay, so of course Michael Moe is the next person that these companies start coming to when they are coming out of things like Bobby's Incubator and other incubators that exist in the industry. Michael is chairman of GSB Capital. I will tell you, full disclosure, he is an investor in EdSurge.
And into you.
Of course, since he's already given us our money, I can now ask him nasty questions. So Michael, let's talk a little bit about what you have been seeing in the industry. There has been this flood of companies. To what degree are these companies really based on strong business principles? To what degree are they based, do you care about the research? And then we'll get to the impact as well.
Well, first of all, I think as it relates to companies in the space, I mean, entrepreneurs flock to problems, and capital is pretty efficient. It flows where the greatest opportunities are. So I think there is a strong reason to be optimistic that that we're going to see a lot of breakthrough ideas come to this space. I mean, you've had about a 50% compounded IRR or return in terms of capital flow into the space. A record this quarter, about $600 million came into the education space. And when you look at a global marketplace, knowledge-based economy, there's no greater issue than to how to better educate the populace. What we're seeing, and why I think you're seeing this, is problem opportunity. But for the first time, education historically has been sort of an incremental business. It was sort of step by step. And now you're starting to see what I call weapons of mass instruction. Literally, business solutions that are able to reach broad scale in a very rapid rapid speed. Ultimately, and this is what we focus on, is this what we call return on education, or ROE. What kind of impact is being driven by the product or solution or course. And ultimately, what we believe is that the R return, or IRR, equals ROE. So we're looking for the companies that will have the greatest impact in terms of student outcomes, because we think those are going to be the ones that have the greatest impact in terms of our financial returns.
So I want to dig into the number that you mentioned for a moment. You said first quarter, $600 million went into the education space, which was a pretty big number, right?
Biggest number ever. Right.
Biggest number ever.
Right.
Some of those, there are a couple of really big deals in there. I think a $100 million deal that kind of takes up a big chunk of that. But we're also seeing a lot of very, very small companies with very small amounts of money. Do these companies have enough money to actually prove that their idea can make a difference?
Well, I think when you look broad outside the education space, one of the great things about being an entrepreneur today is it takes a lot less capital to take your idea to the marketplace. And so, the fact of the matter is, I think a lot of great ideas are drowned by too much capital. And so I think with the fact that you're seeing, and I think an efficient amount of capital come into the space is healthy. And I think, I don't think you're seeing businesses that really have great entrepreneurs, great solutions, not getting the capital they need.
We're going to come back to that, and we're also going to jump over to Zach, because Zach's been on the other end of that. Zach has been running Ngrade since 2009? 2010. And it's been a hot shot in the education technology space, and he sold out to one of the big guys. Zach, is there enough money in this space for starting companies and genuinely growing them?
Absolutely. I think that the interesting part about education that differs, that the kind of other spaces don't necessarily follow is that there's no trade secrets in education. So if a district or teachers have a good experience with a product, they don't try to hide that. They scream that from the top of their lungs. And I think that's why you're seeing some of, all of this early excitement about education. Because, if it starts out at the teacher level, which is what generates that first round of capital, but then we saw the exact same type of patterns at the district level. So once you kind of get into the space, and there's a lot of companies trying to create amazing experiences for teachers, then that kind of parlays into, a great principal experience, a great district experience, and people are glad to shout that out.
But do you have the capital that you need to grow? Talk a little bit about your decision to sell to McGraw-Hill.
Absolutely. So for us, it was about, it was really about accelerating our vision. So, and one component of that certainly was capital, but other components are certainly that there are some folks in the education space that have, a large distribution channel, and they have a lot of folks. They have a lot of, a lot of amazing products that we saw we could have the ability to work with, but I think overall there is capital out there. There were several venture funds. There's several venture funds interested in funding these companies. As Michael just said, you're seeing all-time records for that.
Mm-hmm. And so Chip Pacek is co-founder and CEO of 2U, and he's taken it all the way. So Chip, you've kind of taken the whole process. Take us through how hard it was to originally raise that capital, how hard it was to jump to the next spot, and then, get it all the way
Well,
down.
first I would tell you, we definitively don't believe we've taken it all the way.
Yeah,
So
okay. You're not done
the
yet?
IPO is a great day. So for those that don't know the company, so we partner with top colleges and universities to build what we believe are the world's best online degree programs. So very capital intensive model. And so while we were thrilled to ring the NASDAQ bell 31 days ago, that was exciting, big day in any sort of entrepreneur's career. But we really feel like we're in the second inning. This is a very long play. We think the deck in higher ed is kind of fundamentally being reshuffled right now. So if the 1800s was about Cambridge and Oxford and the 1900s was about the US Ivy League, we think that the schools that take online seriously, sort of doing it the real way, not making the students second-class citizens, ending, let's say, the segregation of online students, we think those schools will win over the next 100 years. So we think this is a very long play. But to get to your question, we raised over $100 million in venture capital. I have a couple of great investors in the room, City Light and GSV. I can tell you we were not an easy story. First of all, we started in 2008. That was a tough time to fund a company. Lehman was collapsing, so we actually didn't raise money until 2009. If I did not have some independently wealthy co-founders, we wouldn't be here today without question. So some people believed early and were willing to write payroll checks out of their checking account. Now, once we got into 2009 and so on and so forth, even then, our model was not obvious. So going to a great school like USC or Georgetown and saying, we'd like you to make these students equal in every way, no I on the degree, no E on the degree, same rights, same responsibilities, real Trojans, Tar Heels, and Hoyas, that was not at all obvious in 2008. So, and then on top of that, our model is to share more than 50% of tuition revenue over a 10-plus year period. So nothing about this idea was obvious. Now, fortunately, today, through our platform, so it's a SaaS solution for the university, and our platform average class size is about 10.3. So our motto is no back row. So I thought it was interesting that the front row here was empty for a little while, but we all know the back row, seats closest to the exits, refuge for minds that wander. What if you could remove every student, bring them forward? And so the platform looks, to date myself here, looks a little bit like the Brady Bunch. And so my data point for you is inception to date, we've now taught with an average class size of 10.3, 115,670 live classes. So, scale in a different way. We're certainly not a massively open online course, but these are full degree paying students. So total tuition bookings inception to date about 540 million.
And that's an interesting point. As you point out, it's going to cost me the same to get my Georgetown nursing degree if I'm in Washington, D.C. or if I'm in Des Moines.
That's right. So it is literally the same degree. You're being taught by the same quality faculty. I'd like to make it clear, while we are the SaaS provider with a whole bunch of tech-enabled services underneath, We are not the university, not trying to be the university. Every academic function you would expect the university to do, it does. So these are real Berkeley, Georgetown, GW programs. They're not 2U programs. We're a service provider. But it is exactly the same degree, and we think the right call there is that it should be the same price.
And so I do have to kind of push back a little bit. We have Sebastian Thrun, who's the founder of Udacity, sitting in the front row too. What about the MOOCs? There are now quality degrees, quality programs that are moving closer and closer to full accreditation that are available at fractions of the price.
Well, the reality is the power of the American degree is very real. So I don't want to play the violin for myself, but I'm the first generation college student. I put myself through GW, and when I got to GW, I'd never been out of I'd been out of South Florida once, but I'd never seen snow. I bought my first winter coat the first week of school. Okay. The reason that I bring this up is George Washington University fundamentally changed my life in every possible way. And so today, if you get a great degree in America from a great school, you typically win. Every single metric from earning power to unemployment rate goes up as you go from high school graduate to doctorate. By the way, we announced at Mike Moe's conference a week ago our first online doctorate program, which is interesting. So to answer the question directly, not only are we really driving down people's cost, why for the first time in history you don't have to pick up your life, quit your job, and move to attend a top 20 B school. That's no small thing. Mm-hmm. But when students get out of a Berkeley data science program, they have a phenomenal outcome. Mm-hmm. Problem in tuition billings for America is too many people getting a culinary degree, dropping out halfway, and still working at Applebee's. Now, nothing wrong with Applebee's, but that's not why they got that degree. Yeah. So in our programs, we did convince our board a long time ago that there'd be a long-term correlation between our financial success and the university students' outcomes. And I will tell you, it's not an obvious correlation. A lot of people sort of prove the opposite over the last decade.
We're probably going to come back to this point because I'm still not convinced that your prices aren't going to get pushed down.
Well,
perhaps by a lot.
No, do you want to talk about it now?
No, actually I don't. Because I want to go back to K-12 first. So we're going to come back to that point. One point that I really have for the entire panel is prove to me this time is different. We've been down this path before. We saw when the Macintosh was in the classroom, lots of enthusiasm, lots of energy around education technology. This time feels different, but prove to me why it's different this time.
I think there's 1,000 reasons why it's different, but one, so if you said the last time was sort of that time when the internet bubble was booming, at that time the marketplace just fundamentally wasn't ready. I remember testifying to Congress in 1998. At that time you had one computer for every 7 children. 80% of teachers felt that they weren't comfortable using technology in the classroom. That internet connectivity was non-existent. Mm-hmm. I mean, and on and on and on. Today, right? Basically, the computer in your pocket is more powerful than what brought people to the moon in 1969. You got digital natives that are now the majority teaching, and you're now able to show programs that aren't so clunky. They basically can be used in a very seamless way where you can actually show positive impact that's actually helping tangibly improve the student experience and outcomes with the student. That, again, 15 years ago, none of that existed.
Yeah. Positive outcomes. Are we seeing them?
I think we are seeing positive outcomes. We're also seeing, I think, a change in the attitude of the investor community. And probably many of you in this room are here because I think we're investing, we want to do social impact, investing in a positive way. Education, green energy, or health seems to be where people want to put their money, and education needs so much help and needs so much impact that we can really make a difference. And we are seeing a difference. I mean, in my area where I start the very early one and look at very early stage companies, we are seeing a significant number of people wanting to do this, quitting their jobs and getting ready to make a difference, and coming from all sorts of fields, not just educators. We also see that there's a growth of this new ecosystem, that schools are now, it's okay to talk about bringing in an investor to the school district, or to have the researcher be part of that, or to have the entrepreneur be part of a ecosystem within the schools and within the incubators. So we're seeing a much more collaborative environment going on. And the last thing in in Chip's comment about the program, we just announced the first master's degree in education entrepreneurship online at the University of Pennsylvania. So you can imagine what
And are you charging full fare
we're
for that?
charging full freight for it, and we are.
That's the right call.
But you can imagine what we went through at the University of Pennsylvania. It's the first fully online, program that'll be online from Penn. It was not easy to get through a faculty at the University of Pennsylvania. So we are seeing major changes in it.
Zach, are you seeing positive outcomes? Not just like the fancy stuff we put in press releases,
Yeah.
but genuine change in learning outcomes?
So I think even just to go back to your original question for a second, I think you see an interesting intersection of attitudes, where you had a quote earlier today, and I saw something where it said 96% of teachers believe that students will be more engaged and outcomes will be improved by using technology, and only 14% are using digital curriculum now. So I think that you have this concept of attitudes that are starting to be aligned. You have this concept of a technology stack. So if you start thinking about it, you think about broadband, then you think about devices, then you think about the software, and then all of that's kind of being correlated to budgets. So if, an interesting stat that I also saw was on Chromebooks. Chromebooks now have around, in 2012, they were 1% of the market for the devices in K-12 classrooms. 2013, they were 19%. And I think you're seeing 1 in every 4 devices being sold into K-12 as a Chromebook right now. And that's a $200 to $300 device. So when you look at the budgetary problems in this country, in K-12 education, and you start to think about how the budget intersects with the stack, where there's now broadband, and also the attitudes, of course.
Okay, so we're getting the infrastructure, and there still is a long ways to go.
Yeah.
We've certainly seen statistics around the fact that barely a third of Americans' K-12 schools are actually internet ready at a level that they could do all of the assessments for Common Core standards. But we are getting there, and we are starting to see that momentum. What about the learning itself? I mean, certainly we talk a lot about personalized learning. We're in a world where we know that the kids and the students, and honestly all of us, are going to be confronted with more data than anyone had ever imagined. And so that's part of why we talk about personalized learning, right? You've got to be able to go deep. You've got to be able to see what's going on. Are the technology startups that we are seeing, are they codifying bad old-fashioned practices, or are they actually starting to get us to change the way we think about learning, the way we personalize learning? And this is a question at the higher ed level as well.
I would take issue with the fact that old-fashioned doesn't inherently mean that it's not like everything that's been done over the last 100 years is terrible.
Okay, what do you like?
So the fact is, if you want, as I said, if you go to a great school, a great university, you typically win, really. So.
But are you winning because
So it's
you
a combination
learned a lot,
of
or
using.
just because you got that great badge up there?
No, I mean, look, what I said about George Washington, this is not turning into an ad for GW, but the fact is, it did fundamentally change. They happen to be a partner, by the way.
It is an ad for GW.
But it fundamentally changed my life in a very material way. So the fact is, the combination of using really innovative technology to drive really high quality student outcomes does involve using new technology, and all of our programs are pretty sophisticated tech. I mean, our SaaS solution does 3 things exceptionally well. It delivers high quality distance content, most of it interactive. It offers weekly live classes, and it's a social network more akin to Facebook than Blackboard. But you're going to class once a week with a Berkeley faculty member, live.
Yeah.
And they're at Berkeley for a reason. They're pretty spectacular. I think faculty get too much of a bum rap. And the reality is, I've certainly had faculties, over the last 6 years, we've done this with state institutions, we've done it with decentralized privates, centralized privates, small liberal arts colleges. Faculty governance is a huge part of my life. I deal with it every day. But the fact is, most great faculty want to improve, want to learn, and I really believe are embracing the technology in the right way.
But we're seeing some really interesting changes in technology as we look at it in Penn, and we've got to change the paradigm. Another company that GSV just announced an investment in is Declara. So we used it this semester as a beta at the University of Pennsylvania to teach one of our online classes. It's a completely different metaphor for teaching and uses engagement and collaboration as the way into the content. And we started out using Google Hangouts and Canvas, which is what the University of Pennsylvania buys across the campus. 2 weeks into the class, we were beta at the same time testing Declara. The students asked to switch to the Declara platform because
I was a little nervous what you're going to say.
because they really wanted to change the paradigm that they were used to. Like Chip says, the engagement part and the collaboration is more. So we're seeing that.
And change the paradigm. Just pause for a moment.
Of the
Change
way they
paradigm.
learn.
But what? Just give us an example. What does that actually mean? Change.
Well,
the
we're
paradigm?
bringing students into the classroom today that are learning by sharing bits of knowledge. And in my own research, I've looked at the difference between linear knowledge, the way we currently all learned before, and random knowledge, the way we're learning today. And the linear knowledge, we started, all of us in this room probably started on page 1, got to page 360 of a book, and we took an exam and we learned the information. Today, we are looking at the way the internet evolves, and we're looking at just-in-time learning, we're looking at the links between learning, and the platform Declara allows the students to do that in a much more robust way than a more traditional linear online platform. So we are seeing the technology of changing the metaphor of the way we learn, and that's the kind of research we're doing at the University of Pennsylvania around this.
Yeah, so I mean, we're very excited about Declara, so I'm glad you had a good experience.
But we're going to use it now on the whole.
Okay. Enough advertising. So that's good.
No, well, but you know, what's fundamentally changed and better is now you can have information that allows a student, allows a teacher, allows a principal, allows a parent to know what's going on a real-time basis and be able to create prescriptive measures of again, impacting the learning experience. You know, we're an investor in Dreambox with John Doerr and Reed Hastings. I mean, every single click, that the software is adapting to where the child is at and helping them learn math in a much more effective manner. I think Newton has, we're an investor in that, has tremendous potential as it relates to being adaptive and creating an individualized learning experience, and the more people on the system, the better it is. And I think fundamentally, just going back to 2U, I think the reason why they've enjoyed such enormous success is because students and the schools are seeing such amazing outcomes. I mean, they're really feeling like it might be with exactly the same price. Well, the market's saying that the students think it's worth that.
Right. Sorry.
So no, I think that everybody wants to see these improved outcomes, and I think that for a lot of these startups, they have it just takes time to play out, because these to do a proper research study. I mean, it takes a lot of time.
What's time? How much time?
Well, I mean, it depends how you define outcomes. So there are, if an outcome is defined by some sort of summative assessment, the summative assessment's given once per year. So somebody has to be using a curriculum for the entire year.
But surely we can't be defining progress by summative assessments, by
Absolutely.
once a year tests.
No, I agree with you completely, but that's what I'm saying. It depends what you define. So, for example, something that we do at Ngrade, and we're a platform, not a curriculum provider. So we work with different curriculum providers that deliver over our platform. But to Mike's comment earlier, parent engagement. So we look at the little things as well. So we do our platform does simple things like it sends out a text message if a student has a missing assignment. And we did research with Dr. Peter Bergman at Columbia. And if you simply send out one text message a week to a parent about the child's missing assignment, you'll improve academic outcomes at the school by 0.23 of a letter grade. Mm-hmm. You will decrease behavior marks, and you will increase math summative assessment scores. So I think there are some small wins, and then there are much larger projects that you have some of the companies that Mike's talking about. But I think that everybody along the way is trying to get there.
So you've already heard a couple of terms that are very familiar, and one could almost say kind of buzzy terms in the industry, right? I used one, personalized learning. Michael talked about adaptive learning. We've talked about sort of learning that changes. Another really trendy topic has always been gaming. The one word we haven't actually heard yet on this panel. Is that a trend that's time has come and gone? Bobby, you're laughing at me.
Well, because I'm old and I've been through this one for a long time. But we are having our conference at the University of Pennsylvania, and one of our keynote speakers is the gaming people. And I'm served, full disclosure, on the board of games on the Glass Lab, which is a gaming company. So I do believe in gaming for learning, but I don't think we figured out how to make it effective in the classroom. And we need to make sure that, as one of the women that runs the Glass Lab said, I don't want the assessment and the learning to be an interstitial to the game playing. And right now it is an interstitial. So we sort of play these games and then we test them and we say, oh, look, they played these games and they learned this, but we have no evidence that there was a direct connection.
Okay,
So
no
the
evidence on whether there's a direct connection.
So, by the way, we have Nolan Bushnell,
Yes, I saw
the
Nolan.
founder of Atari, so we should probably have him answer that question. But to me, it's a fundamentally obvious point that you can't learn if you're not engaged. And what gaming does extraordinarily well, and let's broaden it to whole entertainment. I'm going to ask the audience a question in just a second.
All right.
But the point is, if you can fundamentally get a student to be engaged by pulling as opposed to pushing, the opportunities become significant in how you actually learn and retain that. So I did this last week at our conference, but I'm going to ask the audience a question. You're all familiar with Gilligan's Island? Yes? How long was the tour supposed to be?
3 hours.
3 hours, right? Everybody knows 3 hours. Tell me what the quadratic formula is. Nobody remembers. Point is,
I think that's a cheating test. By the way.
The professor just died, actually.
I know, it's so sad.
True.
He did.
But point is,
If I could sing the quadratic equation, I'd get it for you in a
the point is that you just know that because you were engaged, you were participating, you saw it, whatever. How many times you go through the quadratic formula and a bunch of other things, a zillion times you can't retain it. I think again one of the things that gaming does is you can learn and retain things if done right, and I think that's the opportunity.
So going back to several previous lives, I produced a PBS television show for a long time called Standard Deviance that was middle school, high school, and college courses presented by comedians. And that was the entire premise, was that making it entertaining, you'd make it memorable, they'd retain more. Now, I don't want to talk about the demise of that company. I'd rather talk about 2U. But, produced 200 episodes of PBS television, a lot of PBS television based on that entire premise.
Did you find learning outcomes change?
Well, it's a TV show. So, it's inherently a different, your goal is different. You're trying to get viewers, and ultimately, this is way pre-web. So,
Right.
It was picked by TV Guide and Today Show as the top show for kids, and my claim to fame is I gave Kerry Washington her first acting job, which is pretty funny.
There you go.
She was a standard deviant. But the point is, Mike, you couldn't be more, in my opinion, and in our programs today, in our degree programs, there are many individual simulations in various degrees. So, because what we have to do is we have to take the content from the professor, and in many of these really high-end degrees, they're using all kinds of different simulations, and there are some games.
But isn't there, just to push back on the gaming side, because I love games, have to tear my sons off them every single day of the week. Isn't there a difference between sort of entertaining students and giving them meaningful work?
Well, I don't think that meaningful work has to be boring. And do you have to pull your sons off of their math homework? Probably.
Not too frequently. No.
So doesn't it make sense that I just don't think they have to be mutually exclusive. I don't think you have to have meaningful work, not be engaged in entertaining. And if you can make that work, then you got something.
Let's talk about one more part of the ecosystem. We talked about the infrastructure. Okay, there are these emerging tools. Teachers. So we've heard a lot this year about teacher learning. We've heard a lot about, are the teachers prepared to use these tools? Are we seeing enough development to support them? Is this a good business opportunity to build tools for teachers to support them?
Well, coming from a teacher education institution, I'm a big believer that teachers are made, and we can make better teachers. We can't make a teacher. So one of the things we do at Penn that I think is really interesting is we look at those skills and attributes that they need to learn how to do things. We don't teach you. You don't get a class on how to use your VCR, but I thought I needed one at one time. I could use my computer and not my VCR. But the truth of the matter is, most of the teachers coming into the classroom are native. to the industry. But what we're not giving them, and what we need to do and what we do at Penn, is we show them how to integrate those tools and skills into the curriculum and the pedagogy. They know how to use their cell phone. They know how to use their computer. They don't know how to use it in the learning experience, and they don't know how to integrate all of the new tools that we're giving them into the learning. So we need to change the class. We don't need to no longer teach them to use their computer. We need to teach them how to use that in the classroom.
Zach, when you interact with teachers, which you're doing, are you feeling, do you see any change in either their level of comfort in using the tools, in the kind of support that they need for the tools, in the kind of support they need to use digital learning materials broadly?
So I think that I think that in general, professional development has always been a huge component of the way that schools, obviously think about getting teachers up to speed. And I think that the greatest thing that you're seeing with all of these new tools, all of these new curriculum devices, platforms like Ngrade that are extremely easy to use, is when you start at the classroom level, it's because teachers have chosen to use you, not because they were forced to. But when I was talking earlier about products that spread from teachers telling teachers, they love the usability of these products. They love how these products can make their life better, how they can simplify, how they can improve outcomes in the classroom. And so I think that you're seeing it naturally. That's what all of these early stage companies are focusing on. Like every single one is focusing on that teacher experience, and you're naturally seeing more of a comfort level around technology because of it.
And yet that gets to one of the hardest points of this entire industry, right? Which is who's actually buying these tools? Who is buying these tools? So we can say the tools should be built for the teachers. They should be built so that they're really supporting learning. But at the end of the day, we have had decades and decades of the people who are buying the tools not being the people who use the tools.
Yeah.
Is this changing, and doesn't this have to change in order for the companies that you're investing in order for the kind of company that you're running to succeed?
So we're seeing more and more teacher involvement in the procurement process, which we think is a great sign. We are actually, when we are going in and presenting, we are now seeing teachers as part of these committees. We are seeing teachers making requests to their administrators to purchase, but that still is a huge barrier in the space where the end user is very far removed in some cases from the purchase process. And it's, teachers don't have corporate credit cards. So teachers can absolutely love a product and the district can go ahead with some procurement process and replace that product.
Is this the billion-dollar problem that's going to tank some of your companies, Michael?
No.
Because?
Well, I mean, I think some of this is like gravity. Okay, so the point is the fun. Look, tools that show that improve student outcomes, that are easy to adapt. I mean, and use. I mean, that's what's coming, right? I mean, because
But we've already said that we're not sure that they're improving. We haven't seen demonstrated evidence.
Well,
yet.
we've seen demonstrated evidence that what was going on before doesn't work. So I think that's sort of a. Again, I think you have all these kind of false arguments. I think the bottom line is it just doesn't even seem that controversial to me. That if you have something that works, increasingly, whether it's Common Core that I think helps entrepreneurs, or whether it's the transparency of information, and that now you can actually see what's going on and what actual teachers are teaching and what schools are working and what ones aren't, and now these tools are available. If you can show that you have positive impact, it's going to work. Yeah. And again, I'm not naive. I've seen why it hasn't, but I think what went on, 20 years ago, 15 years ago, 10 years ago, 5 years ago, it keeps on getting better for people with solutions. So I don't worry. That's not something I worry about.
We also are using when creating the Education Design Studio at Penn, we actually decided we would put our money where our mouth is and created the design studio out of the Graduate School of Education, because medical schools have been doing this, engineering schools have been doing it, Stanford funds growth. So we actually created the Education Design Studio as a for-profit, and we have a set of limited partners that have invested in, including the University of Pennsylvania, which was a big coup for the university to do that and to actually hold equity in the for-profit. And we actually fund companies because they believe so strongly that we need to get the research into education. And I believe that what Michael says, we're going to see a lot of things that don't work, but we're being much more conscious and thoughtful about what we are doing and what we're investing in.
Chip, do you see a difference in the way universities are thinking about using not just your product, but products generally? Do you see any of this kind of change of behavior happening at the
No
university
question.
level?
I mean,
Can you
absolutely.
give an example?
Well, in our case, it's not a. This is not. We're not a toe in the water solution. It's a major commitment by the university.
Right.
They have to fundamentally change almost every operating procedure that they have in terms of servicing online students that aren't now in Southern Cal or in DC and Georgetown or USC's case. And you can see, I mean, getting to the topic of the panel. I mean, there are a lot of real companies being built right now in ed tech, and I think ed tech in general gets a bit of a bad name.
Because
Well, the reality is all of venture capital, there are many more losses than there are wins, right? But the wins happen to be really big. And if you look at ed tech right now, it's not just 2U. There are many people coming after us. I firmly believe that. So some great companies being built, Pluralsight, Ever5, and some real interesting players that are getting at scale, going at different problems. And I agree with Mike, solving real problems. At the university level, there is no question that some schools are really recognizing the opportunity. You can scale on a global basis. Don't put a campus in Doha or in China. The fact is, you can do this in a really intimate fashion with, our retention rate right now, 84%, job placement rates in the high 80s, low 90s. Placement's a big part of our 2U ecosystem. Just as an example, Georgetown's not going to make somebody a Master of Science in midwifery with virtual babies. Like, you wouldn't want to go to the midwife that delivered the virtual babies, right? So
Give your net promoter score both for students and for your teachers.
So our current it actually went up. Our current net promoter score is 71, which is better than Netflix, Amazon. Net promoter, by the way, most commonly used customer satisfaction measure. Anything above 0 is considered good. Anything above 50 is considered world class. So 71 is outstanding. But thank you, Mike. But the reality is that placement, as an example, is a great to challenge. Coming back to your cost point, doing this the right way is not inexpensive. So Georgetown's been training nurses in a hospital in DC for a long time. I mean, Georgetown. You also think about the incredible nature of these brands. Coca-Cola is the second best known English language word in the world. So hello and then Coke. Coke was founded in 1886. Georgetown and Chapel Hill, 1789. Like, they have 100 years on Coke. I mean, these are unbelievably rich, old, deep brands. So don't screw it up. So when you go online, the notion of, okay, let's leave that whole thing that happens in the field, let's not do that part. No, you got to do it. So we find, using our SaaS solution, a local placement for that student in Nebraska or in Florida. Then we find a preceptor. They're trained by Georgetown on the SaaS solution, and they do their clinicals, and they deliver the babies. So that's not easy. It's operational, and people don't go to Georgetown for their operational efficiency. They go to Georgetown to be taught by a great faculty member. So I think all of that put together, we are considered online programs, but all of our programs have a substantial blend.
I'm going to come to the audience in about a minute or so for questions, and we have some great people in the audience, so I'm sure you'll have some great questions. But one thing I'd love to hear from each of you is, as this field of using technology in education is starting to mature, there clearly are important milestones that are pivotal points in the world's changing and the way that we use this technology changing. And we've talked about some of them. We talked about the usefulness of the technology itself. Does it actually turn on when you turn things on? One milestone that I think a lot about is, will we see definitive schools emerge as really great users of technology, exemplars, case studies of, wow, these guys really do it right. What I'd love to hear from you are, what are some of the other milestones that we should be looking forward to over the next 5 years that will indicate that, yes, this field is merging, is moving ahead, is evolving, or if we get deflected at that milestone, we could, maybe the momentum is dying. What are the milestones?
Let me go up to 60,000 feet. Okay. Because I think what the fundamental issue with our society today is growing inequality that's taking place. And I think when you look at this, as President Obama said, it's the fundamental issue facing the United States today.
You cited a number about the number of states who have kids.
We have 18 states today, up from 4 states in 2000, where over 50% of the student population is in poverty, right? You look at all the correlation with poverty and graduation from high school, graduation from college, and so forth. I mean, and what technology has the opportunity to do is to create greater access, give more people the opportunity to participate in the future. And so I think that the fundamental objective here is how we can educate more people so they can actually not be living dead, but actually, be a productive person in society. Okay. So I think that's a big picture thing. And is that the milestone? No, that's the objective.
The goal.
But I think there's a number of different issues that we got to get at with an urgent basis.
Bobby, you have a
Yeah, at that high point, I think we're looking at moving from how do we make great teachers? Because again, there's a high correlation at the university level, which U2U is looking at, and at the K-12 level and the corporate learning. How do we make great teachers? Because we know if you have great teachers, you're going to have success and greater learning. And how do we get those teachers to be in a place where we can reduce the cost of learning? And I do think there's a high correlation between great teachers and great entrepreneurs in education, and did my TED Talk on it. So I'm really in favor of that.
Okay, she talked about reducing the cost of learning, Chip.
Look, for the first time ever, you can not pick up your life, move, quit your job, and attend a fantastic
Saves
school.
me a little bit of money, but
A
you
little?
still got to cut my tuition
Wait a minute,
costs.
think about it. Wait a minute, a little?
Right.
So you're giving up, in the case of, I'll give you examples in the MBA program at UNC. So the general counsel of the Charlotte Bobcats, the head of the ER of Southeast General DC, a Disney Channel actress with 100,000 Twitter followers, a Turkish professional basketball player, female, an Olympic silver medalist in skiing. These people are all in the program. You're giving up huge economics when you, not just economics, a life path. Now the reason they're in the program is that they believe that they need that MBA in order to take that next step. So the head of the ER actually wants to run part of the hospital. But it's not an immaterial thing to completely uproot yourself. I mean, all five of those people could probably get into Wharton, but they're not going to do that.
Okay,
So
come back to the milestone.
well, I mean, preconceived notions of online education are my company's biggest challenge, and it's not really that much better today, unfortunately. Most online education's been dominated by suboptimal quality players, really, for the last 15 years. And so we deal with it every day. People that come into our programs, one of the more common descriptors of somebody that enrolls in a program is shock once they're in it. Now that also tells you we need to improve our marketing, because you don't want them shocked. You're thrilled they like it, but the fact is they're not expecting it to be as great as it is. And the challenge is, if you go from here to Europe to Asia, it gets worse. Preconceived notions get worse across the globe because online education just hasn't been very good for very long. So from my standpoint, over time, we think that'll be real wind at the company's back as those preconceived notions improve.
Okay, Zach.
So, what's going to make EdTech? I mean, I think that was the original question. Go.
Yeah.
I
Are you
think
telling me I punted the question?
no. I think it's different. I think it's different in the
I started
K-12
the
environment. It's. But I think that Mike took the 65,000.
Yeah, you were a little
approach.
higher than 16,000.
If you go to the 500 feet approach,
Yeah.
I think that you're thinking about devices and teachers with the proper professional development for how to use the devices.
Yeah.
And I think that the content, the curriculum, it will optimize over time. So you will see, these early stage companies that once people are using the devices, they're using the programs, they will get better over time.
Yeah.
But I think that it starts with that basic stack. I'm going to assume that the broadband's going to get there.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's
So
the way I think about it.
basic stack outcomes, the basic belief and the demonstration that there's quality education. So these are the preconditions to actually build an industry.
Right. But I think you look at a fundamental driver just of living. Educational attainment, it's a fundamental reality. And as a country, we've gone from first in the world to 10th, 13th in the world from that standpoint. So there's a lot of room for opportunity. I think education technology is almost sort of like I think education and technology, it's like a redundancy. I mean, it
Should be a redundancy.
Well, it should be redundancy. It has to be redundancy. It's just going to be a fundamental part of how people learn.
Kind of like business technology.
Yeah. I mean, people don't say business technology, right?
Yeah. Anyone in the audience like to join this conversation? Sir, right there. And I think we have a mic, so if you speak into the mic, your voice is recorded for the world.
Okay, thank you. My name is Eran. I'm advisor to Israeli Minister of Education, advisor to education technology, also 2 years searching this EdTech ecosystem for the Milken Institute. Now, we find in the ministry that the right way for us as a country to go for open source solutions. We don't want to end up depending on a single solution. We say that as time goes by, we want to
Right.
keep ourselves flexible. On the other side, we have of the scale, we have the quality. So how do you address that tension between quality and open source?
Great question. So you've got open source, which should be free, but is it going to be good enough quality, or will it undermine?
I mean, open source shouldn't be. I think it doesn't have to be for free. If some a teacher develop a digital content and it can set it through through the web,
Great.
but how do I regulate the quality?
Yeah, free, I think, again, if you focus on outcomes, right, whether it's free or costs a lot of money, it's not the point. It's what do you get, what's the return on, what is the actual ultimate outcome from that product, service, course. And so I think the whole debate about one, for-profit, not-for-profit is silly. I mean, who cares? What matters is the outcomes. Does it cost does the online program cost as much as it would cost to do a physical program, or is it free? Who cares? Is what matches with that student, and what do they get for that? Taking their time and taking a free MOOC, or taking their time and money and doing a 2U. Ultimately, it's what do they get for that? How happy? What are the outcomes?
I think there's a paradigm shift going on in open source and open educational resources. Having run Curriki, which is the K through 12 open source platform, I think we're looking. I don't think the open resources are any less quality than the kind you get from the best publishers. I think the problem is we had a bar set that the publisher set, and we thought, well, if it has X name on it, it's okay. Where in the open source community, we had no bar. So if you look at what Jimmy Wales did in Wikipedia, it took a long time to set that bar. In education, we just haven't gotten there. And I think, as Mike pointed out, we need to have it to look at what's going to aggregate both the best of the online open source and the best of the for-profit. I don't have any problem. I want the best, and I want a platform that integrates them both, and that then the teacher or the principal or the university professor will say it's okay to use that. We have a lot of models out there going on right now looking at open source solutions at the higher ed. You have Boundless, you have Flatworld, and in the K through 12, you have TSL that just is sharing a lot of free resources and worrying about how to evaluate it. So we see a lot of money going into figuring out what the solution is on using both methods. McGraw-Hill just amounts to Create platform, which allows you to bring both open and vetted sources in.
So the standard should be the same. Is it actually delivering results? But we still need better measures of whether we're getting those results.
Can I jump? Because I think there's like three different things that I'm hearing. There's the concept of free curriculum or content. There's the concept of open, which can be open educational software. And then there's the concept of open source, which is saying, here's source code. Go. And I think that's where your question was more towards? So I think that in the U.S., there's obviously some amazing technologists, all throughout Israel, as there are in the U.S. But in the U.S., the current K through 12 school district, they're not asking for open source in the context of please take some software and they're going to modify the code, because in the U.S., there's 15,000 different school districts, and they're not all equipped with technology teams that can modify code.
But some of the states are.
The bigger ones are.
We're seeing state governments actually do that kind of open source modification on behalf of their districts.
So you see some of the bigger units, but in general, that is a small number of that large space. So I think that open source software is a little bit more of a challenge. And I think there's some amazing open educational resources, and we have a free version of our platform for anybody to come and sign up. But as to open source, I think that at the state level, at a country level, there may be interest. But as to the local districts, which is what drives the business in this country most of the time, it's a bigger challenge.
Okay, person in the back. You. Yeah, you.
Roger Castellani. I teach at Milken Community High School, so this is a K-12, really high school kind of a question. But as you measure the products and whether they work or not, I mean, what are we looking for? What do we call an educated child, particularly graduating from high school? And what do you think those metrics are like? Now, you mentioned, like, how many of us in here know the quadratic equation, but do we call that educated? I mean, what should we do with a child, or any of us in here, who don't know the quadratic equation? Maybe we don't know our states and capitals, but is that what we're measuring? And then, you know, the income, average income in here is what, $200,000 per person or something? But if we don't know our quadratic equation, you know, how did we ever make it? And so I guess one of the questions I have is what should, and how do you feel the measurements are for like a high school education? What does that degree do for you? What should we know? What should a high school graduate be able to do? So.
Wow, I think you
Whoa.
just defined the next panel because they're all incredibly important questions. But does anyone want to take a piece of that?
Bobby?
Bobby? Okay.
Well, I think one of the.
I'm the higher ed guy.
Well,
Come on.
go ahead, Bob. Bobby will actually have an intelligent response, but my
Go ahead, Mike.
I'll just speak. No,
ahead.
but I think one of the fundamental things that an educated person needs to know is how to learn, because what we know is how dynamic society is and how things evolve and change. And so the average graduate from college today, the Department of Labor says is going to have 15 different careers between now and the time they retire, right? And so. Well, and I was doing. I have no earthly idea. I was using, but I think critical thinking. I mean, you know, you look at sort of the foundation of what a person needs to be educated, and then how to access that ongoing learning.
And are these tools helping us? Are these tools helping
I
us?
think they're helping, and I think you've opened up, as Betsy says, a whole panel. But I think the real important question is, what are we going to teach in schools? What are the skills we need to teach? Because we can't teach the facts. We have to teach a set of skills for learning. And we're part of that firestorm that's going on now. If you watch what's happening with Common Core and people saying we like it, we don't like it, it's terrible, it's going to make everybody. But Common Core actually did move from a more fact-based set of standards to a more learning skill set of standards. Didn't do it perfectly, but it did go that way. And in addition, we're seeing the whole demise of InBloom and the way we use data. So I think there's going to be a growing change in what we say is considered an educated person, rather than that they can list all the presidents of the United States, which those of us that went to school when I did, that was one of the things you had to. I know my children didn't have to list all the presidents of the United States. So.
Okay, lightning question for all the panelists as we wrap up. Make one prediction, or you can cite one tool, profit, nonprofit, open source, not open source. One thing that we are all going to be talking about next year when we come back here next year. One thing that we're going to be talking about next year when we come back.
I think one of the most important opportunities is what I call knowledge as a currency, which is this idea that the degree was the historic kind of metric that allowed you to kind of advance from go and get an opportunity in a career. I think increasingly you're getting your education from a variety of sources, and who creates the currency, so that, you know, you take a MOOC class or you get to have an internship or whatever. This all kind of aggregates to my personal knowledge portfolio. I think we're right on the cusp. You're seeing entrepreneurs attacking this problem. It's definitely, I think, a huge opportunity. So I think a year from now,
knowledge as currency with maybe some credentialing in there. Chip, I'm sure you're going to have a response to that, because that could be a challenge for you. Hey, he's on a lot of boards. Okay, another prediction?
The elimination of the back row at the Milken conference. Hashtag no back row.
Okay,
I like
all right.
that.
He wants everyone sitting up front. Zach, Bobby?
You're going to start to be able to answer some of your questions about, are these early stage companies working?
Good.
Are they improving outcomes?
I think we're going to be talking about the evolution of the ecosystem for learning and teaching and investing, that we're getting more of that integrated together. Mike calls it the ROE, I call it this new ecosystem for innovation, but it is who's going to play in it and how do we know they're playing.
My guarantee is you will be reading about all of this in EdSurge this year and next year. Thank you very, very much. Appreciate it.